In front of the eyes of his readers, Paul paints an image of an olive tree. And for a person who grew up in the Mediterranean region, such an image is self-evident. Everybody understood naturally because everybody had an olive tree in his garden. The olive tree is one of the royal trees in the land of Israel. Without the olive tree, life in the land of Israel is unthinkable, and the Bible is unimaginable without the olive tree. And then the Apostle Paul, in keeping with ancient Jewish tradition, alluded to the olive tree as an image of Israel. It's actually an image of the land of Israel and the people of Israel in a union. We should never forget that. And then he says, and I actually would like you to open your Bibles now at Romans 11, verse 17. Don't just look at the screen, because I will give you my translation, but you should compare it with your translation. It says there, but if some of the branches were broken off, and you, who are a wild olive shoot, were grafted in among them. You have to pay heed here to every word, because it doesn't say you were grafted in their place. And I have to emphasize that because I looked up even the Hebrew translations of this verse. Originally, Paul wrote in Greek. And if we open today a Hebrew Bible, it's translated from the Greek. And both major translations that we use here in our congregations, in the Messianic Jewish congregations, or Hebrew-speaking Christian congregations, however you call them, they say that we were grafted in their place. But what it says here in Greek is very clear. We are grafted in among them. Now, let's be clear. There is only one olive tree. There's only one way to the Father. This is very important because we have Christian theologies who go ahead and say, okay, there's one way for the Jewish people and another way to come to the Father for non-Jews, for Gentiles. The Bible never says that. There's one way. And then I'd like to take another passage from Ephesians 2, where Paul explains something similar. He actually uses different words but explains the same thing. And interestingly, before he had described what is life from dead, just in Romans 11. And then Paul writes to the Ephesians, remember therefore what was in former times you, the Gentiles in the flesh, who are being called uncircumcised by the so-called circumcision that is performed in the flesh by hand. Namely, remember, at that time you were without Messiah, excluded from the citizenship of Israel. It's a very political term that is being used here in Ephesians 2, verse 12. It says you were strangers to the covenants of promise, without hope, without God in this world. But now, in Messiah Yeshua, you who were once far off have been brought near in the blood of the Messiah. You have been grafted in to the olive tree. For he is our peace. He makes both one. He breaks down the dividing wall, the enmity in his flesh. He abolishes the law of commandments and ordinances so that he might create the two, the Jew and the non-Jew, in himself into one new man, and thus making peace. He reconciles the two in one body with the one true only living God, the God of Israel. Through the cross, he, and now it says here literally, he kills the enmity in him. I'll never forget when I met in Lebanon, actually, a friend of mine who, before he came to the Lord, he was a Salafi sheikh, and he was trained to kill people. And he, the former Muslim, says, look what Messiah did here. He killed the enmity in him. He comes to proclaim the good news of peace to you who are far off, and peace to those who are close, because through him we have access both together in one spirit to the Father. So then you are no longer strangers and guests, but you are fellow citizens of the saints, and I would like to translate here, roommates of the one true God. You live in the same building, in the same room with him, established on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, whose cornerstone is Messiah, Yeshua, in whom the whole structure being joined together and grows into one holy temple in the Lord. In him you are being built together into a dwelling place of the one true God in the Spirit. We have to see that what Paul says here in Romans 11, he says, you're being put into the one true olive tree, and you become thus, and I quote now verse 17, you become a shareholder. He uses another word, synkoinonos, which is it means together, but you are together having fellowship in the root and the fatness of the olive tree. Now, the interesting thing, and with this I want to close, is that Paul is actually not saying something new from a Jewish point of view. I know that a lot of Jews today feel that they are the Gentiles and we have to keep a distance, and here's something new. But if I look into the Talmud, I find very similar things. And listen to the words. It says there that Rabbi Elazar stated, what is meant by the text? And then he quotes Genesis 12, verse 3, and in these shall the families of the earth be blessed. And now you should understand Hebrew here to see what he does. He makes a play with the words. He says, the Holy One, blessed be he, God, said to Abraham, I have two godly shoots to engraft on you. And its root, the Moabites, and Naamah, the Ammonites. And he says, all the families of the earth, even the other families who live in the earth, are blessed only for Israel's sake. What he says there, you should not say, Ve'yivrechu b'cha kol mishpachot ha'adama, and in you shall be blessed all the nations of the earth, but ve'yavrichu b'cha, and you shall be engrafted all the nations of the earth. So he just changes a little bit the vowels in the Hebrew sentence to say it's already there in Genesis 12, verse 3, in this very first word that God has to Abraham, that this truth of being engrafted is hidden. It doesn't say in the New Testament, it says in the Talmud. So what Rabbi Elazar comes to the conclusion that all the families of the earth, even the other families who live on the earth, are blessed only for Israel's sake or through Israel or in their relationship with Israel. Even, he says there, the ships that go from Gaul, from France to Spain, are blessed only for Israel's sake.